The executive director of the Volunteer Lawyers Project of Central New York. I use they, them pronouns. I am here with Mallory Livingston, who's the director of our LGBT rights program, which really focuses on trans rights. We're so pleased to have you join today. Mallory will do a more of an intro and do the whole presentation, but before she does, I just wanted to give a quick intro to our organization for those who are not familiar with us. The Volunteer Lawyers Project of Central New York is a free civil legal aid organization based out of Syracuse, but we serve throughout the Central New York, Southern Tier, North Country region. Our transgender rights program has a special focus on the Southern Tier and Central New York. We also do immigration law, family law, elder law, debt work, small business, and more. Really, we structure ourselves to be a gap filler organization. So we have a staff of about 30 people, but we have a volunteer panel of over 600 lawyers, law students, paralegals, and others who really magnify the impact we're able to make. So I just say all of this because I want you to think about us. If you don't know where to send somebody, we have, telephone-based advice and counsel programs. And I will drop our website into the chat just so everybody has it and you can look at it. We have a lot of great resources there beyond just the LGBT rights. We have forms to help people file petitions to force their landlords to make repairs to housing. We have forms to help immigrants who have children who are afraid that they might be detained fill out designations for who would take care of their children if they end up in immigration detention, and a lot more. So I hope that if you're new to VLP, you'll connect with us. If you know us already, that you'll connect with us again. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to hand it over to Mallory. Mallory is a leading transgender rights attorney in New York State with decades of experience and is truly a leader in civil rights for transgender rights here locally and throughout the state as both an activist and as an attorney. So I hope you all enjoy. Take it away, Mallory.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mallory Livingston. Thank you for the introduction, Sal. Way more than I deserve on the plotted side. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law since 1989, which means I've been around for just a very long time. I've been representing transgender people almost exclusively, I think, since 2012. I'm the director of the LGBT rights program for the Volunteer Lawyers Project. I've been doing that for almost 7 years now. And in addition to that, I'm an adjunct professor of law at Cornell University Law School, where I teach a clinic on transgender civil rights. And that class has been going on for about the same amount of time. We typically have about 8 students every semester, and they assisted in preparing some of the materials that you're going to see today, and some of the information that I'll be providing. The reason we came up with the notion of doing a presentation for transgender folks and those who work with transgender persons on the subject of identity documents is because based on our experience with the community, this is really the hot issue. This is where the need for help is most apparent under the current circumstances, which I'm sure you're all aware of are not the best when it comes to the history of transgender civil rights. One of the things that we do are name changes. That's probably the bulk of our work, is helping people navigate that path. In fact, we've done successfully, I think, about 1,125 name changes for transgender persons the last time I checked. And part of the name change process is going to involve your identity documents, getting those corrected to reflect the new name, and deciding whether or not to what to do with the gender marker that's on those identity documents. And we accomplish that work with the name changes at clinics that we conduct at various locations, often in rural areas. One of our biggest clinics that we have twice a year is in Oneonta, that in conjunction with the folks at the Gender Wellness Center. And it used to be at the end of that process, when we would meet with our clients face to face, we'd work on all their name change papers. And then at the end, they would have an interview with me where I would talk about what their specific situation is and give them some advice and recommendations on what to do once we get the name change done. Once that's done, then what? And that used to be a really short conversation because the advice was pretty much the same in almost every case. And let's get all of your identity documents in alignment with regard to the gender that's expressed in the photograph, the gender that's expressed in the name, if it's not a gender neutral name change, and the gender marker. Let's get all of that into alignment because I felt that that was the best way to protect yourself against discrimination. In order for someone to discriminate against a trans person, they have to know you're trans. And if all your identity documents are in alignment, that's not necessarily so readily apparent. And it's kind of your first layer of defense against discrimination. And for other reasons, I mean, it's also very empowering and to be able to have official papers, official documents recognize your gender identity as being real and being authentic. And so there were reasons, apart from just strictly legal, as to why we would give that advice. And that was, pretty short conversations that we would have. But now, given the current circumstances, these conversations are much longer. They're much more complex. The issues are critical, and it's different for each client. And so these conversations now take quite a bit of time. Usually at the end of these clinics, my voice is shot and I can't speak for 3 days afterwards because of the long conferences I've had with each and every client that we've helped in our clinic. And so the thought was that, well, and this isn't just happening at our clinics. We also are asked to come and provide information to various support groups. I recently was just at a church locally here in Syracuse, and they had a support group for parents of trans folks that were part of the parish. And I went there and I was scheduled to be there for a half hour. I was there for, 2.5, 3 hours answering questions. And so this is really an important issue in our community right now, and it needs to be addressed. And we need more than just a handful of lawyers here and there at clinics with this information and sharing it with the community. We need to amplify the message. And so that's why we came up with this presentation to hopefully spread the word and the knowledge so that this information can help every member of the community, not just the ones that are in our clinic, make it to our clinics. This is just a basic outline of the kinds of things we're going to talk about, the different identity documents that are in play here. The name change process, that's where it all starts. One of the main reasons our folks need help with our identity documents is that the name change is a critical part of people's transition. No amount of danger or concern with the current political circumstances are going to stop our people from getting their name changes done. And that is always going to involve correcting their identity documents. And in the current climate, that's a very complex issue that needs to be fully understood. Sal told you about the Volunteer Lawyers Project. I'll give you just a little bit more of the history. The Volunteer Lawyers Project started as a nonprofit started by the Onondaga County Bar Association to help local attorneys to fulfill their pro bono obligations. Local attorneys were having trouble doing that because the pro bono work was work they didn't have experience in and they didn't know how to do it. If they were tax lawyers, they didn't know how to do an eviction defense. If they're real estate attorneys, they don't know how to do, a transgender name change. And so the Volunteer Lawyers Project will hire attorneys who were experienced in those areas and could supervise and train the local members of the bar so that they could take on that work. And that certainly helped amplify the work that VLP is doing and trying to provide free legal services to people who need them but can't afford them. To be a solid, described it to be a gap filler in terms of legal services. And one of the biggest gaps we're having to do.
Oh boy, Mallory froze. So we're just gonna I'll keep on talking until she comes back, but um hopefully she will pop right back in. In the meantime, I do see one of the questions, which is somebody asked a question about if we've seen an uptick in the number of folks coming in for assistance with obtaining their passport with the new policies. I mean, this is an interesting question. There's no real simple way to answer this because we have seen I guess we've seen an uptick in the number of people coming in with questions about whether or not it's safe to update their passport at this time. Um, what we've been seeing is that there's real fear in the trans community about whether or not the federal government is going to be gathering documents uh, oh, hold on. Mallory said her computer just crashed. I'm going to tell her to email me her presentation. And because you know how it is, tech just never works the way we want. And then I'll tell her to join from her phone. Uh, so the the problem that we've been seeing is that there's real fear, and I think real legitimate fear in the trans and non-binary and non-conforming community um, about whether or not the federal government is gathering kind of like a list of who is trans and would use it to target the trans community in the future. And I say this about why it's a legitimate fear because the federal government has proposed many different pieces of legislation that would potentially target trans people, target enforcement of trans people, of enforcement of laws against trans people. And then at the same time, what we've been seeing on a national level is that more and more states are passing anti-trans legislation where they are passing laws that make it so that people can't access bathrooms, can't join sporting activities or use locker rooms or things like that. All of which there's been a lot of rhetoric around, but I will say that trans people are far, far, far more likely to be victims of crimes and of harassment due to using a bathroom that doesn't align with their gender identity than anybody else is likely to be a victim of a crime of a trans person. To my knowledge, there's not been one reported incident of that impact. Um, okay, so the next one I see is, can you speak to trans kids getting their first gender affirming identity documents? So with kids, we work with a lot of children. Many, many, many of those 1,000 name changes that Volunteer Lawyers Project has done have been for minor children. And it's quite easy to update a name for a kiddo, but it is more complicated to do gender identity documents. It's more complicated to do gender identity documents in general, whether it's for kids or for adults. And part of this is because there is no like one uniform place where one's gender identity is recorded. And as we've discovered with this federal administration, it's recorded in ways that we didn't even know, right? Like, so in the past, we didn't know, like we've had incidents where people have applied for passports using documents that all recognize their gender identity as they now identify, and they're getting back passports that have the sex assigned at birth. And all we can figure is they're tying it out to like social security records or things like that. We don't really know where the information is coming from. So with minors, it is it depends on the state in which they were born, whether or not they can update their birth certificate. And it depends on the state in which they live on whether or not they can do an attestation to update like their if they get a driver's license or a non-driver's license ID. And so this is the kind of thing that we do when we meet with the clients and we're talking with them. When we're doing a name change, we're not just assessing, the name change. We're also looking like, okay, where are they born? Can this name change be updated on their birth certificate? What is their gender identity? Do they want their gender identity to be updated on their legal documents? And if so, which legal documents can be updated? And this leads to really complicated situations where, for example, my passport says female, but my driver's license has an X on it. And I've chosen to keep it that way because the X automatically outs me as non-binary. Of course, now the female probably would confuse many of the folks at the that I'm going through like TSA with, but each person is a personal decision to decide how they want to manage that. And there are safety risks involved. And that's why working with somebody like Mallory, who can help people do safety planning, who's been thinking in this for like decades, has been really, really helpful. Um, Okay, so we regularly do name changes for kiddos. We less often like we don't do gender orders usually. We don't usually need to because New York doesn't require an order. Okay, hold on one second. I'm gonna pop back up her PowerPoint, which she says she just sent to me. No, it hasn't come through yet. I'm gonna go to the next question in the meantime. What is the status of minors who have a legal name change getting a new Social Security card? Either going into a local Social Security office or can the amendment forms and documents be mailed in? Yeah, so Social Security still honors all name changes. They don't give problems with name changes. So you can go through doing the name change update on a Social Security card, whichever way that you want. And that's true for minors or adults. It's name changes aren't the problem. It's the gender marker that this federal administration has substantially changed all of the practices that were previously established for how to handle it. Um, so that I wouldn't worry about doing as much. Let me see if I've got this. Yes, I have Mallory's presentation now. Give me one sec to get it up and share it, and I can keep moving forward with it. Um, One second from beginning, and then let me share my screen and just check if Mallory can join from her phone. And again, I apologize for these technical difficulties. It's like you never get these technical difficulties until all of a sudden you're presenting, and then there's always a technical difficulty, and that's just the way it goes. Okay, can folks see the presentation at this point? Somebody can drop in the chat if yes. Okay, beautiful. I'm so happy. Thank you all for responding. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and advance through some of this. Okay. So, when we talk about correcting identity documents, this is why we framed this as yeah, so somebody just said, I heard Caitlyn Jenner got her passport back with an M on the marker. Yes, that's correct. The federal administration is actively reversing people's gender and sex designations on their passports when people are renewing their passports at this point, which is absolutely wild and something we've never seen before. Um, and and if they seem to be going back to Social Security records at birth at this point. Hi, Mallory. Okay, so I'm presenting I've got your presentation here. I've just been answering questions and answers while you've been gone. So if you want to pick right up with what to consider before correcting identification, just unmute yourself and I'll advance your slides as you go through, okay? Um, and one question I wasn't 100% sure how to answer was the question of speaking to when trans kids can get their first gender affirming identity documents. I did speak to that we can do name changes and we always do name changes, but I did say that it's a little bit more confusing around the gender identity because it depends on the state they were born in and it depends on the state they're currently living in and it depends on which documents they're trying to get updated with their gender identity. So that was the only one I wasn't 100% sure how to answer. When is the first time or how you counsel youth about updating those documents? Oh, I can't hear you yet. Try again. Still can't hear you. Are you able to change the audio on it? Oh boy. The tech continues, folks. The tech continues. Can you change the audio on it at all? Try speaking again. No, we still can't hear you. How frustrating. Okay. Well, I'll go through and work on trying to present some of this, and you can keep on toggling your sound and see if with the little drop down you can get it. Maybe if you use headphones, it would work. I'm also going to message Bethany and see if she can help you. Okay. So, having the appropriate identity documents truly is very important to the gender diverse community because what we've seen in so much social science has shown, study after study has shown that if folks don't have their identity documents aligned with their name and gender identity, the likelihood of harassment and discrimination in employment and in all things, whether it's voting, travel, applying for jobs, healthcare, and more is just so much higher. I mean, we have had people, told that their documents are fraudulent or things like that in ways that we just know that they would never have had happened if they were cisgendered, with cisgendered meaning the sex assigned at birth is the same gender that they aligns with the gender they identified with. Mallory, try talking again. Let's see if it works now. Nope, still no. Can you Teams message Bethany and see if she can help troubleshoot this with you? Okay. So there are some common misconceptions. So there's not actually a general notice requirement. In fact, name changes historically used to be done by common law, where people just started being called something new and they continue being called something new. I have a great example of this. My grandfather's name at birth was George, and he went by Benjamin, and on his death certificate it said Benjamin. There was no name change. It just happened. Um, so there's no general notice requirement. An application for a name change can't be denied simply because somebody is trans. And the only reason it can really be denied is if it's being done for fraudulent purposes. Where there was a recent case where there was a person who was denied a name change because they wanted to change their first name to doctor. And the judge was worried that they would be holding themselves out to be a doctor. No medical transition is necessary. In fact, no medical transition is necessary to update your gender marker in New York State at this point either. Not for your ID, not for your name, and also not for your gender identity. And medical transition is a funny concept anyway, because what does it mean for each person actually really varies, and it's a personal decision and a personal conversation with their doctor. And there's no required period of time that a name must be used for. So it's not like the person has to try out using the name for 6 months or a year or 5 years before doing a name change. They just need to want to use that name and only that name going forward. Um, okay, next. Okay. So, New York, we have a name change statute that really clearly lays out what needs to be included. This can sometimes really throw off the community we're working with because we have to ask them things like if they have judgments that are outstanding. We have to ask them things like, do they have any, kids? Do they have any criminal record? And it's all just in the statute. It's just um, put in there to make sure that nobody's changing their name to try to avoid any responsibilities. Um, hold on, let's, okay. Uh, right. The judge's discretion, as I mentioned, is only for fraud or it can't be just the potential of confusion. It's got to be like, we think you're doing this for the wrong reason. And filing a name change, it's usually filed in the Supreme Court of the county where the petitioner resides, although um, Supreme Courts, which is the district court, it's not our highest court of the land. It's a very confusing name. The Supreme Court actually, any Supreme Court can take a name change. So if there is a Supreme Court judge we know, like a county, we know where they give trans people more difficulty, we actually can file it in any county. It needs to generally be e-filed if it's filed by an attorney, which is very easy, and we do these for free, regardless of income level. And there is a filing fee of $210 to the court unless the person applies for a waiver of the fee due to financial hardship. Um, there are free name change do-it-yourself programs, and we suggest those for folks that are doing name changes that are not based on gender identity. And even for those with gender identity, as the reason behind it, they can do it there, but if they have any concerns, we can do it for them and make it really easy. All right, next. These are the questions of what the petitioner needs. And oh, I see a question here. I apologize. Let me see. Going down to see it. If you, the person who raised your hand, if you can drop the question into the chat, that would be great. Will you send out the slides? These will be helpful. Absolutely. We'll send out the slides to everybody who registered for the webinar because we have your email address. It's very easy for us to do. Um, okay, so I had gone over some of what the person needs already. And now and we talked a little bit about special circumstances. These are the ones that really end up. Oh, Mallory, you're connected to audio. Can you try speaking?
Uh,
Hey, we got Mallory back. All right, Mallory, you go right ahead. I'll advance your slides for you.
where?
We'll move to the next. I can finish up this slide and then we can move forward. But essentially,
I can. No, I can. I'll jump in. I'm fine. I'm fine.
okay.
So we're talking about what has to, how you do a name change.
Well, just the special situations, you know.
Right, right. There are circumstances that can complicate the name change. None of these prevent you from getting a name change done. They just make it. It just takes longer, and additional work needs to be uh, done. The statute itself. One of the bigger issues are notices. Sometimes you have to send a notice to a third party to let that person know that, or that entity know that your client is changing their name. Maybe they have child support obligations that's in arrears. Maybe they're on probation, uh, some other issue like that. And although the statute doesn't always require specifically that a notice be sent, the way we do things in our office, it's a little bit different. Not everybody does it this way. Is we try to anticipate any notices that a judge might require, even if the statute itself doesn't require them specifically, uh, so that we can ultimately get a clean order for our clients. because what could happen, like the statute says, you have to tell the judge about any prior spouses that your client might have, but it doesn't say you have to send a notice. And so some offices probably wouldn't send the notice, and they would wait to see if the judge is going to order that to happen. But if the judge does order it, the way they do it is they write it into the name change order, and it'll say, the name change is not effective until you've sent this notice out to whatever the judge is asking to be done. And that's simple enough. But the problem then is, for the rest of my client's life, whenever they have to produce that proof of their name change, it's also going to, whoever they're showing it to is going to see all this information having to do with, probation or child support arrears, or a maintenance obligation to a former spouse, or probation, whatever it is. And I don't think that my client should have to display that information to every single person in the rest of their lives when they have to show them the name change order.
Hey,
And that,
Mallory, quick
yes,
question that I got in the chat that I want you to speak to while we're talking about how name changes are done. Somebody asked, how old does a youth have to be to do a name change?
there's no minimum. There's no minimum age if both parents consent uh, to the name change. There is no age. Now, the court can require a hearing. Most of these name changes occur without a hearing, but a judge can request one. And I know that the younger the child whose name is being changed, the younger they are, the more likely the judge is going to want to have some sort of hearing. My experience with those hearings are, though, that a judge who asks for that kind of hearing only does so once and never does it again, because it's kind of a waste of time. I had one. The first one I had was a 7-year-old, and the judge just hadn't seen a name change for the child that young, and wanted to see what was going on with this. Uh, and we had it scheduled in the judge's chambers so that we wouldn't be in open court. It would be pretty intimidating for a 7-year-old. And we went into the judge's chambers, and I went in there with the parents, and the 7-year-old comes in, and she's wearing her My Little Pony sweatshirt, and she brought all these My Little Pony toys to play with. And the judge took one look at her and was like, "Oh, okay, I get it. Never mind. You people can go." And that was it. And that judge never requested a hearing in any of our cases. That was 7 years ago. So there really is no limit. It can get very difficult, though, if you don't have both parents consenting to the name change. If somebody is opposing the name change, then there's definitely going to be a hearing. And I think that a lot of judges the younger they are, the more likely they're going to say, let's keep the status quo. And unless somebody can show me that this name change is vital to this child's health and well-being, as right now, as opposed to waiting, a year or two or whatever, then they're going to lean towards the status quo. The statute doesn't require the court to get the kid's opinion on what to do with their name until they're 14 years old. And once they're that age, then the court is required to find out what the child's position on this. And in those kinds of cases, we do a consent form tailored for the child to sign, hopefully to save them the trauma of having to go in for an actual hearing and see a scary judge.
And I'll just jump in here and say that most of the time, then we've done minor name changes, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Mallory, but my experience has been most of the time, if one of the parents doesn't agree, they're often not in the kids' lives. They're often, like they are not visiting with the kid. They're not actively engaging with the kid. They often don't reply to. We send out a consent thing. They often don't reply. We'll then give them notice, prove there's notice. They often don't show up at court. So that doesn't necessarily stop a name change. You know, the parent who's raising the kiddo and knows this is in the kid's best interest can go forward, do the hearing, and we've seen many of these name changes be granted. It's only if like both of the parents are actively engaged in the kid's life that the it starts becoming iffy, like Mallory said. But we've done name changes where there was a history of abuse, and the parent is now totally estranged. And those name changes went forward, especially if the abuse was directed at the kiddo, which unfortunately has happened many, many times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have yet to in the thousand and some odd name changes that we've successfully done, we've yet to lose a single one where the issue was the age of the child. Uh, so when there's a parent that doesn't consent, there are, as Sal pointed out, that doesn't end the argument. There are options. Um, Chiefly, if it's a parent that's not involved with the kid at all, I mean, why the judge isn't going to be moved to listen to this parent who hasn't been involved whatsoever, except suddenly when with the except the singularity of the name change. The judge is not going to be very impressed with that opposition. And maybe it's because we're really good lawyers, but I think it's just because it's a pretty bad argument for an uninvolved parent to impose their will on the name change. But the younger the child is, the dicier that is going to get. And I've encountered more judicial resistance on those cases than almost any others. All right. The when a name change is filed, throughout the whole history of the name change process and trans people, we've been kind of fighting keep the notion of keeping these name changes private and having the record sealed. It's a safety issue. There was a time when we had to publish name changes in newspapers, which included the client's address, included all sorts of information. So like if you were someone who wanted to harm a trans person but you couldn't find one, you could just pick up your local newspaper and read the legal notices section and find a trans person. We got rid of that. There was years of litigation, and eventually the Gender Recognition Act passed some years ago that got rid of that. But that didn't end the privacy issue. We always ask for these records to be sealed when we file them, so that they're sealed during the pendency of the action while the judge is mulling over the case. Sometimes a case is solved in a week. Sometimes it hangs around in the judge's chambers for months on end. During that time, we want those records sealed so they don't show up on the internet or on these. I think it's called trellises, where
Yeah,
they're the biggest
exactly.
offenders out there.
Mallory,
Uh,
great question posed here. What if somebody had a name change performed like a decade ago and it wasn't sealed and they want it sealed now because how everything is getting put up into the cloud and being able to be grabbed by Trellis?
I haven't had a client come to us with that problem, but I am fairly certain that I could I could file a petition to seal the records.
And this is a great moment where I do a little pitch. I'm involved with legislative advocacy to pass a law this year that would make all court-ordered name changes categorically private, just like name changes in marriage or adoption or divorce are categorically private. So it would just make it so all name changes, regardless of whether it's for reasons of gender, being a domestic violence victim, just not liking your name, would not be available publicly. So I'll drop the bill number in the chat, and it's one of those things where if you are so inclined to reach out to your local assembly persons or senators to express support, it would be great if you did so because it would make a big difference for all the community to not have to justify why they don't want their personal information of that nature up on the internet.
Right. I mean, I can remember we were testing these things, and there was a time where if I e-filed a case for a client, at 10 o'clock and then searched their name on Trellis at 10:05, all their information would be there, including the petition that I drafted that would have medical information in it. So it was pretty bad. And so the process involved, we used to have to ask for a sealing order while the action was pending. And then the name change order itself would have language in it that would permanently seal the records once the name change is granted. And so we would need sort of two orders. One was a bridge to get us through the time the court is trying to figure out what to do with this case. And then permanently once a final order has been issued. And that was not a very successful way to do it for a lot of sort of tactical reasons. If you send an order to a judge asking them to do something, there's always a period between when you submit the request and when the request is granted. And during that time, that was always enough time for this stuff to get on the internet. And once it's there forever, and it's everywhere. And so what the courts did is they came up with an amended rule that required all name change applications to be sealed upon filing. So there is no gap from when I press the button that says file these papers, it is sealed from that moment on. There's no period by which somebody at the courthouse has to review it and say, oh, this is a name change, I need to seal it. So that so that now there's no delay. And that's protecting the documents during the pendency of the action. But at the end, the final order, if the judge involved refuses to include in the order that the records be sealed, then we're right back where we started from, where all these records are going to be on the internet. The way the statutes are written now, the way the case law is, it's really the law is that if a person asks for their name change to be sealed, it should be sealed. But there's just a little bit of room in the language, because you always have to have an exception in every rule, that there could be some extraordinary circumstances where a judge might decide, well, yes, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to seal a name change, but this particular one has got some unique circumstances where I'm not going to seal it. And so there is just enough room in the language for a judge to find an exception. And then what we have is a few judges who aren't really crazy about doing name changes for transgender folks. And so they always find that the exception applies 100% of the time, not 1%, but 100% of the time. And they refuse to seal any transgender name changes. Those cases have been appealed. Those judges lose every time, but it doesn't necessarily stop them. Being overturned on appeal is not an impeachable offense by a judge, and so these judges are still out there, and that's why Sal and others are in our community, the legal community, are working on better legislation to finally, once and for all, win this argument over the privacy of name change documents. Our office actually we know the judges that are not going to grant the sealing, and we have ways of avoiding our cases getting before them. So if you're in one of those counties, definitely give us a call. You couldn't go the route of not having your record sealed and then have an appeal and wait, however long that takes. But between now and when Sal gets these laws passed, if you're in Saratoga County, say, or Albany or Schenectady, you should give us a call, and we can find a way to file your case in such a way that you won't get those.
I love your optimism, Mallory. I love the optimism, the when.
Oh, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. State identity documents. The primary things that we use are birth certificates issued by states, driver's license issued by states. One of the slides I was going to talk about earlier, I would have gone into the whole history of where birth certificates came from and how they were never meant to be some sort of golden card that you had to have, golden key that you had to have in order to open the lock on all of your civil rights. But that's what it's being used for now. It's kind of like the anchor, and without it, you could have trouble having your civil rights being recognized. The driver's license is really one of my favorite things to talk about. Now we've got a matter we're investigating where one of our clients went to get an enhanced ID at a DMV and submitted all the proper paperwork, and the DMV claimed that their Social Security card was not sufficiently embossed. The lettering wasn't raised enough, and so they decided that it was a fraudulent document, and they confiscated the Social Security card and refused to give my client an enhanced ID. So we're spending a lot of time right now going over issues at the DMV. At the DMV currently, you can get 3 different versions of a license or a non-driver ID. There's the regular one that we used to always get. In the upper right-hand corner, there'll be some small writing that'll say something along the lines of not for use for federal purposes. And then there's a real ID that will have a star in the upper right corner. And that ID can be used to board a domestic flight, not to cross a border, but just you can fly from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, but you can't fly from Pittsburgh to Paris with it. And then there's the enhanced ID, which is the highest ID that driver's license that you can get, that would have a flag in the upper right corner. And the enhanced ID functions almost like a mini passport. If you live in a border state, you can use it to go to Canada and to return from Canada, or to go to Mexico and return from Mexico, by land or by sea, not by plane. Only if you travel by land, or I don't know, if you take a raft across the St. Lawrence River or something. But you got to travel by land or by sea. And so the enhanced ID, and what I love about the enhanced ID is it was created by federal law. The federal government, at least certain factions in the federal government, were not happy with the process that states were using to identify people. And they wanted to make them stricter, come up with higher standards to be able to get these IDs. The states weren't all that crazy about that that idea, and so the feds were able to pass a law called the Real ID Act, but they had to make it voluntary, not mandatory. Otherwise, the states wouldn't have accepted it, and the bill would never have passed. But what they did was they put some treats inside the law to make it attractive for states to adopt the Real ID Act and to put it in play at their DMVs, and also to make it attractive to citizens to want to get the ID. And what that treat is that you get to use it. You don't need to get a passport. You can use the enhanced ID to go to Mexico or Canada. And what's interesting about that is when the Real ID Act was passed, it was before all the anti-trans craziness that we see now, before that stuff started. And so when they passed that law, they didn't think to put any restrictions in there regarding gender markers. They didn't fill it with a bunch of anti-trans guns. And so New York is free to issue you an enhanced ID, fulfilling all of the requirements that the feds want in order for you to get that level of an ID. And they can also, use their own rules, the state's rules, as far as gender markers, which means, and in New York, you can get the gender marker that you want. You don't need any medical proof. You just have to fill out the proper paperwork. To get the name change, you do need a court-ordered name change, which is one of the things that our office does. And really, it's the highest level ID you can get that is going to have a photograph that has projects the gender identity you want to project, to have the correct name on there, and to have the gender marker on it that matches your gender identity. And it's actually a document that was created. It's a creature of federal law. So in a sense, it's a federal document, which is why you can use it as a mini passport.
Mallory, there's an interesting question that was posed that I've not been asked before, which is, have you ever dealt with the New York State Office of Professions? I've been told they can't change names on professional licenses. That doesn't sound right to me.
That's
And
not true.
yeah, yeah. This is
That's
one of
not
those
true.
cases where if somebody was having difficulty updating their name on a professional license, they should contact us because it's a court order. They have to honor it, correct?
Yeah, I happen to hold a professional license myself, and
As
went
do I, where names have been changed.
yeah, where and was able to change
Yeah.
the name on it. Well, what I found with the DMV, and I'm sure it probably holds with other offices in the state government, in that yes, New York is one of the better states to live in if you're a trans person, but that doesn't mean that every single person that's ever been hired for a government position feels that way. And so when you walk into a DMV, you don't know what kind of clerk you're going to get at the window, and you might get someone who's going to do their job and do it right, and you might get someone who decides that their own personal political beliefs, and their own beliefs about trans people, that they should use what little power they have as a DMV clerk or as an employee of the Office of Professional Licensing, uh, uh, to cause, to make life harder for a trans person who has had the misfortune of coming to their window at the DMV. I had that problem myself when I went to get my own driver's license straightened out, and it took I had to make a big fuss, and they had to call Albany, and the people at Albany told them, "What are you doing?" And I got what I came for before it was all over. But I had to overcome the resistance of a clerk who wasn't crazy about correcting the names and the gender markers on driver's license of transgender persons. Now, the thing about birth certificates, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a slide a little bit later, but it had always been in New York. You can change the name on your birth certificate. You can change the gender marker on it. All you need is the certified copy of the name change order. And there's two one-page documents you have to fill out. One of them is a short affidavit where you promise that you're not changing the gender marker for a fraudulent purpose. And the other is really just an application to make sure that they get the name change right. They spell it right, and they change your name on the birth certificate, not somebody else's birth certificate. Filling out the paperwork and sending it to the New York State Department of Health is the easy part. Ever getting a response from the Department of Health is not easy. We've had people wait 8-9 months before they finally get it. You can call and ask them what's going on, but I don't know that anyone's ever succeeded in reaching anybody who could give them any meaningful information on that. You just have to wait and wait and wait, and then one day magically your new birth certificate will show up in your mailbox. The real question now, though, is whether or not you should correct the gender marker and the name on your birth certificate. It had always been our advice that you should, but as you will see later, a little foreshadowing, that may not be the case in today's climate.
Now, Mallory, I am very sorry to say we only have 7 minutes left. So
Oh my Lord.
I know, and there's so many questions about federal identity documents. So
All right, so I'm going to give a 7-minute sprint on documents. And could you just advance the slide? There's a letter there that we got from the State Department I want people to see.
Okay.
Boom. Okay. All right. So birth certificates. Birth certificates are the anchor for all of your civil rights. And we have reached a point, unfortunately, and this letter is when it dawned on me that this was happening, that we're reaching a point where the federal government may not accept a corrected birth certificate as valid. And so if you correct your birth certificate and the federal government now deems that to not be a valid document, your old birth certificate is gone. It can't be, resurrected. It's gone. The only birth certificate you have is this one that the federal government now will not accept. This is a letter, a client of ours who had done a name change, corrected their birth certificate, and then applied for a passport from the federal government. They got this letter from the State Department saying that their sex assigned at birth was not clear from the documents that they had submitted. Well, it was definitely clear. It was right there in the birth certificate that she provided. But they have the social security number, and the social security number would tell them that this is that the sex assigned at birth was something different than what was on this birth certificate. Also, the nature of the name change, it wasn't a gender neutral name change. It was a clearly sort of a gender positive, if you will, name change. And so they could tell that this was a passport application from a trans person, likely with a corrected birth certificate. Their own rules kind of require them to use birth certificates as the gold standard as to proving what features and designations should be in your passport. But they don't want to accept it, even though that's their own rules. And so what they're asking our client to do is to find early public records contemporaneous with their birth that would show what their sex assigned at birth was, something other than the birth certificate that they had submitted. So they're asking our client to gather the proof to show that the birth certificate they previously sent was inaccurate. And with this federal government, I mean, how far away are the words inaccurate and fraudulent? Because one's a mistake, one's a crime, right? So are they asking my client to gather the proof that they need to charge them with a crime? I mean,
Not yet.
and where's my client going to get these early public records that show what their sex assigned at birth was? The early public records, the birth certificate, right? So my client actually would have been, I think, in a safer position had they never corrected their birth certificate. I recently applied for a new social security card and a passport myself, and I have never changed my birth certificate. It has the old name on it. It has the original sex assigned at birth on it. And I was able to get a passport without a problem. It's got a gender marker on it that I don't like, but they're going to do that anyway. It does have the new name on it, so that's good. So really, I don't want my clients to be in a position where when we're in a society where increasingly, if you don't have a birth certificate that the government will accept as valid, you may not be able to vote. You may not be able to apply for SNAP benefits. You might not be able to apply for disability benefits. I mean, this is vital stuff for our community. And I don't want to place that in danger by messing around with the birth certificate. And so
Mallory, I've got a question here that I think is really, I want to make sure we
Sure.
answer, which is if somebody has a regular ID with their new name on it, like a new driver's license, and it's not one of the enhanced ones, so it says not for federal purposes, can they use that ID to help substantiate a name change for their social security card, despite it not being for federal purposes? So you know how when you go in to update your social security card, you've got the name change order, but they want an ID. Is your non-enhanced ID sufficient?
Uh,
I believe yes, right?
yeah, they need a government issued picture ID. You're going to also have to submit your birth certificate. So as far as the citizenship and the genuineness, all this stuff, that's all those questions are kind of resolved with the birth certificate. Because birth certificate is actually kind of a better ID than a driver's license.
Do you need the birth certificate for just updating the name on your social security card?
Yeah, I had to bring mine in. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, definitely. They give it back to you.
Yeah.
So,
And then
so
somebody asked, can you do a birth certificate name change at your local town hall if you live where you were born in New York?
in New York, you can do a court ordered name change either in county court or Supreme Court.
Right. But in terms of updating do you have to send it to Vital Records? And my understanding is yes. The only local changes that can be made are if
Yeah,
like the
it's
hospital did a typo and you have to catch it. I forget if it's in like 30 days or 60 days or something, or a
yeah,
year,
it's got to
something
go
like
to
that.
the New York State Department of Health.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
any change. Um, okay, we only have 1 minute left, but I think you should keep going, but we might lose people. So we do have this
Well,
recorded, so
just
we'll
one
send the
last
link
deal.
to the
The whole issue
recording.
on passports. Okay, if you
Yeah.
don't, our advice on passports very quickly: if you don't need a passport, don't get one. If you're, this is not the best time in U.S. history to let the federal government know that you're trans. And if your name change is not a gender neutral name change, if you apply for a new passport to change the name, then you're telling the federal government that you're trans. All the other information you're submitting to get the new passport is going to tell them where you live, your social security number, all of this kind of things. And if you got a family trip to Greece planned, okay, I get it. Then get a passport. But as far as the risk is concerned, why take it if you don't need it?
There is a question here about if your passport doesn't, the gender there doesn't align with your how you appear, is there a problem with coming back into the US? And I would say from anecdotal evidence of what we've seen, no. Like people have been able to re-enter the
Right.
US without problem.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just did this myself, and
yeah, and I've done it as
I was going to a hockey game, and I did not want to present as female at the hockey game because there's too many people, and maybe I'm going to run into, a Charlie Kirk fan or somebody or whatever, and I'm going to end up having a problem. And I just wanted to get in and out of the stadium safely. But I brought my wig with me in the car so that when I got when I had to go across the border, I could make sure that I looked like my photograph. Um, I don't. It didn't matter when I was going into Canada, but I definitely made sure that coming back. I also checked to see when the busiest times at the border were, because that's the time you want to go. Because when you have somebody, a customs guy at the border, and he's got a line of cars a mile long, he's trying to get everybody through as fast as possible. And there's less scrutiny. And once he sees you got the proper IDs and you all say that you're born in the United States, then let you go.
Yeah, to our
Uh,
knowledge, there has not been any order or guidance put out to CBP, to Customs and Border Patrol, saying that people should not be admitted to the U.S. if they're U.S. citizens or non-citizens if their gender they're presenting doesn't align with their ID documents. As long as they are that person, that's not a reason to not re-enter. And
right.
I have entered and exited the US several times in the last, year and a half, and I've never had any issues. I think there's a lot of anxiety about this, but up until this point, we've not seen a reason why people shouldn't feel comfortable re-entering the US at this point. And if that changes, we'll let people know. I'm not saying it's out of the scope of reality that it could change, but at this point, we've not seen that being an issue.
Yeah, yeah. And my last piece of advice, though, is the problem raised by this question isn't one that's just at the border. It can happen if a police officer pulls you over and they look at your ID and the gender marker doesn't match the photo. And some cop might decide that that is grounds for reasonable suspicion. And once a cop has grounds for reasonable suspicion, they can detain you. The amount of searching they can do is increased. And none of that is good stuff. And that's why my last piece of advice is to make sure that you always have with you in the glove compartment of every car you travel in a certified copy of your name change order and a copy of your birth certificate. And also have pictures of those on your cell phone. That way, if some cop looks at your picture and your gender marker and say, hey, what's up with that? Why are these things different? At least different in my eye. You can show them the paperwork that shows that you're not some crook who's got multiple identities, a trunk full of different ID cards. You're just a person who's legally changed their name. And that removes the grounds for legal suspicion. Now they no longer have grounds to hold you, to detain you, to search you, etc. So always have those documents with you. It's easy for the ladies. You got a purse or something with you. For the guys, I know it's tough. So that's why I say, put it in the glove compartment. and have it on your phone so that you could display it to any recalcitrant police officer. Fun times, everybody. Fun times.
Do you have any last notes you want to mention about correcting birth certificates? I know you've gone through how to do it in New York. Do you want to mention anything about other states?
Well, I mean, my current advice is to not correct your birth certificate in New York. And um, the thing is, correcting your birth certificate nowadays doesn't really get you anything anyway. It doesn't get you the gender marker you want on your birth certificate. I mean, on your passport. And it doesn't matter if you've corrected your birth certificate to get the gender marker you want on your enhanced ID. So at the New York level, at the state level, there's really no need for it, and even less of a need from other states. The other states are there's 50 different states, 50 different sets of rules. Some states it's very easy to correct your birth certificate, just like it is in New York. Other states it's next to it's impossible, and others are somewhere in between where it's just a very arduous. There's many obstacles that you have to go through to get it done. And if you're a resident of the state of New York, I mean, I don't think it's anything that you need, and it's not going to really get you any benefits. We're not licensed to practice in other states, but we can put you in touch with resources in other places to help you get that done. We can give you some advice on what the basic process, or whether it's a state where it's even possible.
Any notes you want to talk further about the sex designation change order, about
Yeah,
what
just
somebody
real
would want to
quickly,
do it?
in New York, you can get a court order very similar to a name change order, where a judge will sign an order changing your sex designation. Whether or not that will be recognized in other jurisdictions is an open question, and there's as many answers as there are other jurisdictions outside of New York. So I can't give you much guidance on that. I can tell you the way that it doesn't get you anything really in New York. But I think I know my people, and I think having an order from a judge saying what their gender marker is kind of a nice thing to have. And maybe you'll get an argument with somebody, at the doctor's office who won't use the right gender marker on your documents or something, and that would be helpful to pull out. So we do get it for our clients, but our recommendation is first we do the name change, and then we get the sex designation order change. It is possible to do it all at once, but then whenever you have to produce your name change order, it's going to have all this stuff about changing your sex designation on it. And I don't think that's anybody's business when all you need to do is prove to a bank that you changed your name 20 years ago. I don't think you should have to give them any information about your gender. And so we do it separately. So we have two different orders. Clean one that deals just with the name change, and then one just deals with the sex designation. So we'll do that for you, but we do it in a two-step process.
And on this next one, on the after approval, I touched upon this briefly while you had your technical difficulties, that there's not like one centralized database where you just update your name and update your gender marker, and it's like poof, everything's
Wouldn't
done.
that be nice? No, it's a paper
Uh,
chase. It's a paper chase.
yeah.
You have to go to every entity that issues any kind of ID document and fill out whatever paperwork they need to get that done. Your bank will have paperwork that they need you to fill out to change the name on your accounts. People forget about car insurance sometimes, and that's it was one of the happier days in my transition journey, when I got to go to my car insurance and have them rerun how much my insurance should cost as a female person as opposed to a male driver. As it turns out, it was a lot less. But if you're a trans guy, that may be one gender change you don't want to do. You might want to just leave it where it is so you can continue, because otherwise you'll end up paying higher car insurance.
And you have a link here to our friends at the Empire Justice Center and their post name change guide. This is a great thing to share with the community. We love Empire Justice Center. They're our buddies and we work really closely with them. And so make sure if you have folks that are getting name changes, you share this guide. It's regularly, updated as well. Like they keep these up to date. And we've answered the questions along the way. So I think, do you have any final statements you want to make, Mallory?
Well, it just the times are difficult, and I know a lot of us have a lot of hope for the midterms, that maybe things will change. I have concerns about that, but I'm far less pessimistic, I think, now than I have been at any time since all of this started. Mainly because I have seen the strength of our community coalesce and find our footing. It's kind of like we took a surprise shot when we weren't looking, and but we're recovering, and one by one, I think we're making things better and better. And as dark as these days are, I think every day we're getting it closer to the light. So take heart. Uh, uh, we've had periods like this in our history, and we've always come through it. And we're going to make it through this.
I think that's a wonderful way to end this. And I do see there's a question about getting certified copies of birth certificates in other states and how to update IDs in other states. And so I'm just dropping a link in the chat to transequality.org. They have a really great guide that is available that they try to keep up to state how whether or not you can update names in other states and the process of requesting copies and things like that. So that's a really good resource. So, well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for bearing with our technical difficulties. We will circulate the link both to this recording and to the slides for everyone. And please reach out if you have additional questions. You can reach us. You can reach Mallory at lgbt at vlpcny.org very easily. And we do our best to get back to people in a timely manner, but we are small but mighty. So if it takes us a little bit, it's not that we're ignoring you, it's that we're just doing our hardest. And otherwise, thank you so much for your interest in this. Thank you for your support of the trans community. And it means more than you can possibly imagine right now. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. Bye.